2, 1.
Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast where we explore all things cinema. I want to welcome back to the show Duke Haney, who is a writer and the co-screenwriter of the film we're discussing today, Friday the 13th, Part 7. He is also an author of Death Valley Superstars, Subversia, and Banned for Life. And I'm happy to welcome back Stephen Chambers, who you will know as the former co-host of this show when it was called Movie versus Film, and before that it was called Coffee with Aliens at the Movies.
Yeah,
he's also an actor and a writer.
No, he's not an actor. I retired.
Oh, did you? Okay, I won't even scratch that then.
Yeah, just a writer.
Screenwriter, or a writer in general, not just screenwriting.
No, screenwriter.
Screenwriter. Well, I'll mention a few of the films you appeared in.
Yes.
Casino Jack with Kevin Spacey. He was the lead in a film called The Corridor. Murdoch Mysteries as well. So, gentlemen, welcome back. It's a nice little reunion since our last talk when we interviewed Duke, the three of us. That was almost 4 years ago now, wasn't it? I would have
met Duke, right? Mm-hmm. That was the last time I did. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. 3 years ago. Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
That was
a lot of fun that
day. It was super cool.
Yeah.
If
like we all clicked and everything. By the way, I'm going to plug my book really fast here.
There we go.
Put that in there. I have to do that. That's become a tradition.
Absolutely.
Since you left us, Stephen.
No.
Sometimes we forget, so we get it. Yeah, let's put it right at the top. Death Valley Superstars, and
man.
There isn't a chapter on this film in that, I don't believe.
Oh God, no.
Or save it for this.
So we'll get Get a transcript.
I wrote about it. I wrote about the Friday the 13th experience. My experience for the book previous to this. It was called Subversia.
Mm-hmm.
And the title of the essay about Friday the 13th was called Friday, Bloody Friday, inspired by the John Schlesinger film.
Yeah.
Sunday, Bloody Sunday.
Yeah.
And the way that piece came to be written was that when I had published my novel, my only to date novel, Banned for Life, I was accepted as a contributor to this online magazine called The Nervous Breakdown. And that was sort of one of the ways in which I was promoting the book. I was writing nonfiction, memoir type pieces for The Nervous Breakdown, and they became quite popular. But I had adopted a sort of pen name for Banned for Life. It was Dr. Haney, because I was so embarrassed by my background in B movies and all that. And I remember people telling me, "Oh, don't feel that way. You have nothing to be ashamed of," and all this stuff. But I was really quite naive. I thought that that people in the so-called literary world would be snobbish about my background and perhaps review the book badly or something along those lines. And then I eventually just decided, I think I'm just going to sort of confess to the world that Dr. Haney is Daryl Haney, the author of, among other films, Friday the 13th, Part 7. So I wrote this essay, and it went up online, and for that magazine, I mean, it was a bit of a sensation. I mean, we used to sort of evaluate the success of a given piece at the Nervous Breakdown by how many comments it got. And I mean, I got like hundreds of comments, and people were terribly enthused. I mean, they were like, "Oh my God, that's one of my favorite. I mean, I saw that when I was 10 years old, that kind of thing." And that had actually, for years, I'd only seen sort of part of the film. I mean, I can get into sort of how that happened because it's sort of funny, but I'd only seen about a half an hour of it, and it was just sort of not on my radar for a long time. And then I was friends with this band with a fitting name on the subject of Jason Voorhees. The name of the band was "And You Will Know Us by the Trail of Dead," and somehow they learned that I was the author of the screenplay for Friday the 13th Part 7, and they had a Yahoo group. I mean, this is how long ago that was. And they would sort of communicate with people through the Yahoo group, with fans, I guess you would say. And they went on there one night and they were like, Duke, did you write the sleeping bag kill? Or actually, I think they had asked me about the film.
That's just a note. Because my son loves these movies. And this morning he was like, "Did you watch Friday the 13th Part 7 again?" And I said, "Yeah, last night." He goes, "You remember the sleeping bag kill?" A 12-year-old, that's his favorite part.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is that I had no idea up until then that the sleeping bag kill was iconic. I had no idea.
Oh, yeah.
That it had become this kind of pop culture thing. It was, I guess, and there are polls that are done or somewhere, I guess, online, that was elected the number one Friday the 13th kill of all time or something.
Wow.
And, I mean, I
go.
Misremembering this, but then of course, everything has to be sort of criticized online, and somebody somewhere accused me of ripping it off from another movie that I had never seen. I think it was Grizzly. I can't quite remember now, but I guess in some horror movie from the 70s, maybe somebody is killed inside a sleeping bag or stuffed inside a sleeping bag or something. But I mean, that the idea for that thing came from my own imagination, because when I was a kid, my brother and sister and I all had sleeping bags as we would go camping sometimes, and we took them down to the basement where we had our television, and we would sort of, we would wrap ourselves up in these sleeping bags like blankets. We would unzip them and they would sort of become sort of blankets. And my brother and sister were really annoying to me. I was the oldest, and I had a fantasy at one point of like stuffing one of them into like his or her sleeping bag and like slamming it against the wall. It's the honest to God truth, and that's where that came from. And one of the first things I did when I got this job, very unexpectedly, to write the sequel, was I just made a list of like basically every household utensil that had not been used, to kill somebody in a film previously. I mean, I was even calling people up, like, "Can you think of any household utensils that could be used to kill someone? What methods can we, because I wanted to come up with these, I mean, I think probably everybody who ever wrote one of these movies did that. They're coming up with ideas. Anyway, so as always, I grab the mic and run off.
Well, you know what? Before, just for the benefit of people who perhaps haven't seen it, or you haven't seen it in a while, let me just read a brief synopsis from Letterboxd. A young girl who possesses the power of telekinesis. I always have a hard time with this word. Telekinesis accidentally causes her father's death after a family dispute at Crystal Lake. Years later, when a doctor tries to exploit her abilities, her power becomes a hellish curse, and she unwittingly unchains the merciless, bloodthirsty Jason Voorhees from his watery grave. The director was John Carl, correct me if I'm wrong, Buechler. I hope I have that right. Buechler. Yeah. And it was written before he was Duke Haney by Daryl Haney.
That's right.
And Manuel Fidello, which I will ask you about.
No, there's no such individual.
Oh, okay. Then we'll get into that. Yeah. Just give you some of the cast. We have Lar Park Lincoln, Kane, Hodder, Terry Kiser.
Wait. Kane Hodder, it's his first Jason movie, and he would go on to do a few. And Terry Kiser, Weekend at Bernie's.
That's right. I thought he looked familiar.
I didn't even realize that. Yeah, he plays the evil psychiatrist in this movie.
That's right.
Who doesn't love a good evil psychiatrist?
Yeah, no, he's great.
But I want to say about Kane Hodder, I have a brother who is a cop. This is a little odd to me. Hopefully he won't see this, but he has like a big tattoo on his leg of Jason Voorhees, in a hockey mask. Okay. I mean, it's odd to me because I wrote one of these fucking movies, and I don't have a fucking tattoo.
Now you got to get one.
I only have one tattoo, and and that was before everybody and their mother had a goddamn tattoo. So I was like, no more. I was doing it not to be trendy, and now everybody else is just a trend. People are still like, "Oh, I'll get a tattoo." They're running out of space in their bodies for tattoos, for Christ's sake. He has this tattoo, and I didn't even know he was particularly a fan of this franchise or anything like that, but because we're not particularly close. But he went to some horror convention in Atlanta, and he met Kane Hodder. I met Kane Hodder really briefly over at Paramount when I was working on the movie. He came in one night because the decision to hire him was John Buechler, the director's. He came in. I just remember really, really dimly, this big guy, and somebody telling me he was a stuntman, former stuntman or something like that, and he was going to play Jason or something. And I don't even know if I said one word to him, and vice versa. But my brother went up to him at the convention and told him that he had a brother who had written Friday the 13th Part 7, and Kane Hodder went into this whole thing. That was relayed to me by my brother. He was like, "Your brother gave me a career," which really shocked the hell out of me because I didn't feel like I'd done any such thing, and I still don't. He was like, because he wrote Jason in a new way, and I got to play that part. And I think one of the reasons people really like Kane Hodder in that part was because he was much more expressive than Jason had ever been.
Well, yeah, and I'd say this too, to me, so I'm a huge horror fan, and I grew up, Friday the 13th was like my jam. Like I knew it before Nightmare on Elm Street or Halloween or whatever. And when I saw 7, it just really spoke to me. And I watched all, not just for this, this kind of happened because Duke and I were talking, because I just on my own went and rewatched all of them. And when I got to 7, I was like, yeah, fuck, this is the one that really spoke to me. And I think it's the first time we care about a character before Jason's introduction. Like it's sort of just like, here's our group and we're all going to kill them and we know how. And here you're kind of invested. It's like a proper movie to me in that here's the character. I forget her name. Tina. Thank you.
Tina
and
Shepard,
we're going to watch her, and it's kind of like a movie. And then there's the inciting incident, the thing, and then Jason's the thing you got to defeat. And so it's kind of more about her than Jason. But also, what I found rewatching this to me, and maybe I'm not alone with other Friday fans, but this is the first time Jason becomes like the iconic Jason. Like he's just a kind of hillbilly, then he's a murderer who can't really die, and by part 6, he's definitely supernatural. But this time, like he's fucking full on. You can see his spine through it. Like he's a monster in this one.
That's true.
His mask goes off too for a while.
Yeah, and they set him on fire, which I think is like one of the longer burns in
I read that
history.
But
this was the first time, you don't know it as a kid. I didn't, but watching it again as an adult, and some would argue that I am one, but this was the time that I was like, oh, Jason's like Jason, the real like monster from another planet, supernatural demon. Like this is the time, because granted, in part 6, and you can see how seriously I take all this, and I do, part 6, he's resurrected from the dead, 100%. This is the first time that happens in part 6. But he's still Jason, like that we've seen, just sort of like a quiet, stalking menace.
He's like Michael Myers. He's like Michael Myers.
He's exactly, just a cooler
completely
outfit.
Inexpressive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that exactly, Duke. And I think that that's very effective for like Halloween part
He's like the
one.
Buster Keaton of like monster
Yeah,
movie
yeah,
monsters,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. That's really good, actually. And this is the time, but to what you were saying there, Duke, is with Kane Hodder, he was more expressive. And it wasn't just the makeup this time making him more like an obvious monster. He it was the heaving. You could feel he was
Yeah.
angry. It wasn't like you could feel it, like, oh shit, which to me made him scarier than the unexpressive thing. Because that's scary, but we already had that in part one, two, three, not one, but part two, three, four, five's questionable because it's not Jason, and six. But here, it's like, oh, there's a lot going on. There's an actual performance, not take away
Yeah.
from the other guys, but like, which I really think is something to do without speech and the whole outfit and not just the mask, but then and the fucking zombie face and the thing and the spine and the ribs and it's real, and it's the first time he has a challenge, right? When you wrote the Carrie meets Friday, like
Yeah.
with Tina, it is the first time. Like thus far, it's not a challenge. It's fun. I love them, and he's just murdering people, and there you go. But this time, it's like, oh, he's met his match until he meets Freddy later. But
Well, that
so
was
yeah, this movie
originally.
was really cool.
No, I'm sorry to cut you off. I
No,
mean,
no, no worries.
you may already know about the history of the film, but what happened was the Friday people had, I guess, reached out to the Nightmare people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read that.
And you know, in the great tradition, I think that it may have began at Universal, which you know, of course, owned all those franchises, but Frankenstein meets the Wolfman.
Yeah.
And, so let's bring together the two iconic, you know, movie monsters of the '80s. I mean, aside from Michael Myers.
But Myers, I'd argue, he was like, there was a couple films in the '80s, but he wasn't. That was a landmark thing in the '70s. But I'd argue, no, Jason and Freddy took over the '80s.
Well,
Myers was kind of in the background.
I would agree. I think. I mean, really, one could say that Jason Voorhees, as a developer, because of course in the first film, I mean, the killer is Jason's mother, who was played by one of James Dean's old girlfriends.
That's right, Betsy Palmer.
Betsy Palmer.
Yeah.
And so and then in the next movie, suddenly people are talking about Jason as if he was the killer all along. They're going,
That's
you know,
right.
he's become this legend, which is kind of weird. I don't, you know, it's been so long since I've seen the films, and I only watched them when I got a call. I mean, I'd never seen one of them when I got a call, possibly pitching ideas to these people at Hometown Films, which was a small company on the Paramount lot, and it was run by Frank Mancuso Jr., whose father was then the head of Paramount. I guess Frank Jr. had bought the franchise from Sean Cunningham,
Right.
and after the second movie or whatever it was. And they were very dismissive of the franchise. I mean, they wanted to make their serious films. Like one of the films they made was Internal Affairs with
Richard Gere.
Oh,
I
right.
love that
Good.
movie.
Really
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
So, I mean, and at the time that I worked for them, when after I got the job, I mean, the two big projects that they were working on, I think one of them was called, I think it was called Permanent Record, and
With
it was
Keanu Reeves.
It was the first thing Keanu Reeves
I've
ever
seen
did,
it.
I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, I saw it. Yeah.
They were doing that, and they were doing I think it was called Back to the Beach. It was this, you know, this thing made for baby boomers. It was you
with
know,
Annette Funicello.
and
Yeah. I've seen
and
it.
they had
yeah.
like all this shit in their office related to those two films. I
Right.
think that they were developing Internal Affairs, or maybe Internal Affairs was, I think it was shooting then. We're shooting maybe by the end of my tenure there, which lasted about 6 months. But I mean, but the Friday, they were all kind of a bit embarrassed by Friday the 13th. It was kind of like somebody trying to hide, you know, porno in their past. In fact,
Right.
I've heard that Sean Cunningham, in fact, did porno, you know, directed porno or something.
Oh,
like
wow.
that, in fact, yeah. And so yeah, they wanted to do this thing where Jason meets Freddy, And the Freddy movies were so popular then that the Freddy people really didn't need this showdown with Jason. The Freddy people were really looking for a way to kind of rejuvenate the series, or they were running out of ways to sort of interest people, I guess, and going back to see the latest sequel. And they were kind of envious. I remember Barbara Sachs, the development person, at least her, maybe more than one person over there saying, they're saying, oh God, I wish we could do more with Jason. He's just this lunk, he doesn't do anything. I mean, like Freddy is so great because, all these things can happen because everybody's asleep when they're dreaming and murders are taking place.
And jokes, right? He became funny.
Exactly. Another thing, by the way, that they were doing, the Hometown Films people were doing at the time that they initiated the sequel was there was a Friday the 13th television series that was being shot in Toronto.
That's right. I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah. And but it had no relationship to the films. It was a different thing. I mean,
it was like a cursed antique shop, right?
That's exactly right.
I remember it.
And it had this premise that the premise was that, I don't know, somebody had inherited this antique shop and there was a curse of everything. So they had these various items at the antique shop had been bought or whatever, and they were wreaking havoc on the lives of the new owners. And so it was almost like this, as I recall, I mean, I think I only saw like one episode or something, but like there's this girl, of course they had to have a hot chick. Yeah. And I think there's kind of like this professor dude. And it seems to me maybe there was somebody else on the show, but it was a bit kind of Scooby-Doo-ish, and they're like running around like, oh, we have to find the cursed teacups.
It was exactly that. Yep.
And so it was all that, and there were constant, faxes going. Yeah, this is the era of the faxes going back and forth between, the production office in Toronto, and I think Ian Patterson, who was the line producer on Friday the 13th, Part 7. I think that he had been working on the television series, and I think that they were going to fire him or had fired him or something. And I think they sort of brought him on to this movie as a sort of a send-off gift or something like that. Gotcha. People do that kind of thing in the film business. It's like, we're going to fire you, but here we'll throw you this candy. Yeah. Right before we let you go. So I had never, when I got the call, it was just the weirdest thing. I had just gotten out here. I was doing a movie for Roger Corman, my first for him. I do write about that in Death Valley Superstars, and I was sleeping on the floor of the dining room floor of Roger's then assistant Anna Roth. She lived in this courtyard bungalow apartment, classic LA in Hollywood. And I went out somewhere one night, and I didn't even have a car. And I guess I'd gone down to the source, and I walked back up, and Anna and these two young women who were her friends, Julia and Debbie, they were watching John Huston's Reflections in the Golden Eye, which is a great film.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And they came in, and I had seen the film projected at Theater 80 on St. Mark's Place in New York. And I walked in, and I was like, oh, you guys are watching Reflections of the Golden Eye. They go, yeah. They go, we can't figure out what's happening except that Robert Forster is gay. I don't even think they named Robert Forster, because at the time, nobody really even he hadn't done, he had been, sent into the desert at that point. But he was the guy riding a horse naked in the film and all this,
Yeah.
They pointed him and said, we think, he's gay. Or I said, no. That's not no. Marlon Brando is gay.
That's right.
And he's obsessed with Robert Forster. And they were like, oh, really? And so Debbie Walsh worked for a woman who knew somebody over at Paramount, and I've forgotten the guy's name now. And he called Debbie's boss, and he said, we are looking for writers. We're looking for a young writer to rejuvenate the Friday the 13th series, because we we're hoping to do, Hometown Films was hoping to do this deal with, the Nightmare on Elm Street people and blah, blah, blah. And that fell through. And and I guess they were already getting pitches and they were sort of, rejecting them all. And said, do you know of anybody, who could do that? And so I guess Debbie's boss mentioned something to Debbie, and Debbie said, oh yeah, there's this guy who just did a movie for Roger Corman, and he's staying with my friend Anna, blah, blah. And so and then Anna relayed this. I'll never forget it. She had this big smile and she goes, I have some big news for you. Do you want to go in and pitch an idea for one of these Friday the 13th movies? And
Amazing.
I was like, wow. Okay. My movie for Roger had wrapped by then, and I had already decided I was going to move to LA. I had already signed on to write another movie for Roger, which ended up being called Crime Zone. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have a car. I was just about to fly back to New York to try to get everything organized there for me to move to LA. And so I said, sure, I'd love to do that, pitch something. And so I had to literally go to a video store and rent, all 6 chapters of the Friday series.
So you had seen none of them yet?
I hadn't seen one.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
One. The only thing I had seen of these movies, there used to be in New York City, where I was living, there used to be these are the kind of movies that used to play on Times Square back when Times Square was interesting.
Right.
And, Disney took it over and made it like this Disneyland play, whatever. It became completely boring. But it used to just be
Taxi Driver, awesome. Right?
Yeah. Taxi Driver, exactly. Porno theaters. And they were like all sorts of shops where, you could buy knives and brass knuckles and, all sorts of shit, and it was kind of really fascinating. But they weren't just showing porno. They would just show these really cheap, splatter movies, like on they were all night movie theaters, like the only ones maybe even still in existence, in the United States at that point, or except for porno theaters. Right. That used to be pretty common. They were like these all night, movie places. I think at one time, because Jack Kerouac writes about nodding off in one with Neil Passy, and so yeah, they would show all these movies and splatter movies and all that. And so they used to have these monitors outside the theaters that would show trailers for whatever splatter movie it was shown inside. And I was kind of fascinated by this whole thing. And I would stop and kind of watch the trailer, and so like Leo Fulci zombie type movies. I mean,
I've seen that a few times. Yeah.
But didn't he make more than one? I mean, I don't even know.
Yeah. That one's called Zombie 2. Oh, because it's I forget. Anyway, yes.
It was that kind of. But anyways, that kind of thing, and like these zombie movies and all that. And I, would stop and watch it. That's all I had ever seen of a Friday the 13th movie was just these, a trailer where it was just. I remember that like one of the trailers I'd seen was just these. It was like a series of blackouts, and it'd be like people turning their head, going, Jason, and then you hear.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like a hand with a machete moving really fast, and it'd be like 1, and then it'd be like Debbie, and then you'd see like a pitchfork, and it'd be 2, and it would count down to like 13 or whatever. So I went off and I rented all these movies and I watched them back to back, and I think I'd only watched like a half an hour, 45 minutes of the first one. I was like, okay, I see completely sort of how this is done. This is like sort of the Agatha Christie 10 Little Indians thing. It's just like this.
Oh, 100%. That's like a good.
Dial,
yeah.
Like it's like dial of victims, and they're all sinners. I mean, they're like young sinners. They're all And so they're all good, and so like one by one in the course of sinning, with drugs or sex or whatever, they're all going to be, killed in these really, horrific ways, one by one. So I just watched the rest to just kind of like catch up on the whole cycle, the soap opera. And I knew that they wanted this, Jason to really square off with, have like a nemesis. Like Freddie, and the other thing, and at the time, nobody was talking about the final girl, like that became like this trope, right? I mean, I'd never heard of it, but it was clear to me watching the films, I mean, every film would end with like one. It was always a girl who was, who would like have a fight to the death with the killer, with the mother in the first case. I think she beheads the mother.
That's right. And then Jason keeps that head as a shrine in part 2.
as one will do. Well, I mean, really,
one will do.
But I really think that the genesis of the modern movie monster of almost all, certainly in America, is Ed Gein, right?
That's the Texas Chainsaw inspiration, right?
I think Psycho really,
or Psycho,
which was based on the Ed Gein case. I think that really it completely redid horror, and it reshaped it. And so there's this whole thing about, somebody kind of swallowed up, the killer was swallowed up by his mother in some fashion. I mean, Psycho was released at the height of this kind of interest in Freud and psychoanalysis and all that, and the Oedipal complex and all that stuff. So yeah, I knew there should be a final girl. And I made up a list of ideas, and one of the ideas I had, I think it was the one I had the least confidence in. It was literally, I remember the last one I pitched. But I thought, well, what if this girl, the final girl, had telekinesis,
right,
like can carry? And so, again, I did not have a car. And I was living, sort of camping out in this apartment off Beachwood in Hollywood, and there's a place up at the top of near the top of Beachwood. There's the Beachwood Cafe, and there's like a little grocery store. And I used to go up and eat at the cafe a lot and everything. And so I walked up the street. And literally called from a payphone. This woman, I'd been given this number of this woman, Barbara Sachs at Hometown Films at Paramount, and I called her. She took the call. I told her who I was, and I pitched her these ideas on the phone. And like everything I said, she was just like, no, no,
right.
And so I came to the last one. I had never encountered a person like her. I mean, I'd heard these legends of these kind of Hollywood executive types,
Right.
And I was like, oh my, it was sort of like meeting Bigfoot or something,
Okay. Yeah.
Because I mean, like I'd heard, always heard these stories about these steely executives. I mean, literally Dawn Steele would be a person like this. Barbara wasn't really truly like that when I actually met her. She was a bit of a troll, like this little woman, but difficult in her way. So I finally came to the last idea. I said, well, I noticed that there's always a girl that battles Jason at the end. What if this girl had telekinetic powers? And Barbara said, Jason versus Carrie. That's an interesting idea. So she said, let me think about it and we'll set up a meeting. And I literally had to walk all the way to Paramount, to Hometown Films for the first meeting. Which was quite a walk because
and Paramount it's still like just south of the cemetery, the Hollywood Forever, right?
It's near Hollywood Forever, sort of.
So that's a walk
because it's on Melrose. Well, I was way up. I mean, to give you some kind of a notion, Beachwood is the road that leads up to the Hollywood sign.
Yeah. Oh shit, that's far.
Yeah. So it's kind of almost up in the hills. And so it's north of Franklin, which is north of Hollywood Boulevard, which is north of Sunset, and Paramount is way down on Melrose Avenue. But I went down and we had this meeting, and she said, "Well, we'll make a decision, in a few days, and I'll give you a call." And I had to go back to New York, and so I gave her my number in New York, and I mean, literally. I had just got off the plane in LaGuardia, taking a cab. I was living in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and I had just walked up the stairs of my building and opened the door. And this is back in the era, of course, of the landline. And the minute I opened the door, or maybe even as I was like turning the key, I heard the phone ringing in the kitchen. I picked it up. It was Barbara Sachs, and she said, "You got the job."
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
So cool.
So I'm sorry it took me so long to.
No, I think
that.
that's so cool. And how that happened, and it wasn't like an agent setting you up or anything. It was
No,
just
completely of my own
people you
agents.
know, yeah, right? Yeah.
And
Like,
how
they
does
got involved.
Manuel? How
Sorry, go
does this
ahead.
person get on the Manuel Fidello? What? How does he?
Hmm.
Why is his name beside yours?
Well, what happened was an agent came in really quickly. His name was Matt Keener. Because you see, I was with a really big agency in New York as an actor. It was called Agency for the Performing Arts. And how I got there is a story unto itself, because it was considered one of the big five. I mean, they handled Steve Martin and all that, like people,
Wow.
really big people. So APA, so they're my agents in New York. And so what happened used to happen a lot. I guess maybe it still happens, but I mean, there were these big agencies that would have a branch in New York and a branch in LA. And often, if an actor came, this happened a lot with people from New York. If they went out to LA, they called their agency and they'd be like, "Hello, I'm in town," and the LA people will kind of ignore them or kind of treat them, poorly or whatever. And so that kind of happened when I got out to LA. I wanted to meet the people at the LA office because I was already thinking I'm probably going to end up moving out here.
Mhm.
So there was a meeting called with a few guys at the agency, so I met them, and they kind of very dutifully took the meeting. There was another guy there. I've forgotten his name. His last name was Brown. He was a real jerk. And there was another guy named Jerry Harrington. And I really liked him because he seemed cool to me for an agent, because like he knew who like Joe Strummer was,
Right.
the Clash, like he was
Yeah,
really
yeah.
into the Clash. And later, I think he even repped Joe Strummer. But I mean, somehow I knew that, or he met. I don't even know how I knew that. But it was like, okay, if I could have an agent, I mean, I'd take that guy,
Yeah.
or an LA agent. So I got the job, and then and I'd gone out to dinner or something with Matt Keener, who worked at APA, and I think maybe before I'd even pitched, he goes, "Well, I have some of my guys going up in this movie, and yeah, I mean, that was the thing. One of the reasons I think that everybody got turned down, a lot of people got turned down for that, was these are people who, like, horror was their thing, right?
Mhm.
Like, they weren't, I mean, they have like this box of tropes that they bring to every job. It's like,
Yep.
what if,
Yep.
I wasn't a professional. I mean, I didn't even want to be a screenwriter. I didn't even want to do it. But I mean, I was doing it because because if I didn't do it, I'd have to like work in a restaurant or something like that in New
Of
York.
course.
So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll do this. I mean, because at least I won't have to go to some horrible restaurant and get yelled at by the cook and stuff. And so, as waiters always do. And so, it just fell into my lap, and I was like, okay. So Matt Keener was kind of boasting me. Yeah, I have my guys, they're doing this and that. And then I told him that, I got the job, and he couldn't believe it. And so like he immediately jumped in there, and sort of like, I'm taking over. And he got me, I mean, this was unheard of at the time, but I mean, he got me a deal. It doesn't sound like that much now, but it was then. I mean, certainly to me, I had no money.
Yeah.
$30,000 for
that's substantial, man, especially
Yeah.
30 whatever years ago.
Yeah, late 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is for the treatment. I mean, this is a standard thing, standard WGA contract, although this is not a WGA job, Writers Guild job. So it was for the treatment, first draft, what they call revision and polish.
Got
So
it.
it was a forced deal, so it was $30,000 for those 4 drafts, and as a back end, what they call a back end, if nobody else was credited no other writer ended up being credited for the script. In other words, if these people didn't have to hire another writer and spend more money, I would get a $10,000 back end at the end of the thing. So what happened was Barbara Sachs, oh God, said this deranged thing to me really early on. It was like, this is going to be the first Friday the 13th movie to win an Oscar.
Right.
I read that.
I've read that.
And I read she also wanted Fellini to do it. I'm like, could you imagine the Fellini version?
Oh my God.
She never said that to me. I mean, if she
I read it, I don't know if it's true, but that's what I read.
If she had said that to me, I would have called the police and I would have said, I have an insane woman over here. She's perhaps dangerously insane. I think that you need to come and take her away.
Yes.
But it was already pretty bad. And so the first few drafts, it was, I'll never forget. I had to go up to Paramount in New York, which is the Gulf and Western building on Columbus. I had to go up there to pick up some kind of documents, like maybe a deal memo, but also she had faxed over immediately she inserted herself into this thing. Cause I was just thinking, these movies are very easy to write. I mean, it's very simple. It's this dial of victims and all that, I had already figured out how to have Jason, we'll have the telekinetic girl somehow break the chains, underwater.
Yep.
And because we had to get him out of the water.
Yeah, get him out of the water.
and so I went, she had put up this, sent me her sketchy outline. I'm like, wait a minute, you are sending me I'm the writer.
Right.
I don't know how did this shit work. And so it was like, something about, the girl and some guy are trapped in a boat or so. It was some kind of really big thing, with all this production value or whatever. I was like, holy shit. So at one point, the first few drafts, there was this insane thing because she wanted there to be a bigger budget and all this production value and all that. So actually I had borrowed heavily from Jaws. It was the whole idea that there was this evil real estate agent who was building condos at Crystal Lake, even knowing that potentially there was this monstrous serial killer who could appear and chop up the condo buyers. But he was building these condos and kind of trying to hide the killings and everything. Or the shady, the dark past of Crystal Lake, potential buyers and all that. And then there was this whole thing, there was a big finale where they were having this carnival. It's like, oh my God, this is so corny. This is out of a million movies. But they were having this big opening for the condos, and they were cutting the ribbon and all that, and so there were Ferris wheels and merry-go-rounds. It was this big event, They're trying to turn it, the opening of these condos into this big event, and somehow Jason came out of the water, and it was and people were running around panicking and all that.
Yeah.
And he was killing, hell, I'm going to kill this one on the Ferris wheel over here, and I'm going to kill this one over here, and then of course he killed the evil real estate mogul and all that, and then somehow the telekinetic girl came along, and they had their big showdown or whatever. But it was kind of like the timber of the first. And I went through 4 drafts right away. I didn't even have a computer. They would call me up and they would say, "Can you come over? We need a new draft. Can you come over?" Because they had a computer at their office and a trailer in the production office. I would go over there. And I would write an entire draft on their computer overnight.
Oh, wow.
And I'd be like, here. And then, 2 days later, they would read it. And I'd get notes from everybody, even the receptionist. Everybody in that office, except Frank Mancuso Jr. And there was this weird guy who worked for Barber who called me up in the middle of the night. I was like, this guy, is this guy coming on to me? He'd be like, hey, what are you doing? And another guy who worked for Barber had been heavily into this thing called EST, which was the self-help. It was a craze in the 1970s. He was Werner Erhard, I think was the guy. This guy was Tim, his name was, really into EST, I remember. So anyway, I went through 4 or 5 drafts, and Frank, again, because these people were trying to disassociate, they were embarrassed by the Friday franchise. Yeah. So Frank was like, oh, I'm going to go think about my Richard Gere movie and, Permanent Record and, Back to the Beach.
Yeah.
And then finally he read the latest draft and he apparently shit. He freaked out and he was like, what the hell, this carnival and what the hell? He's like, no, this is not, he wanted to do it by rote. You know, like just do, which is what I wanted to do originally. It was like, why try to come in, like, you know, do this whole thing? So he told Barbara, no, this is the template for this part 4, the final chapter, so-called final chapter. I mean, we're going to base this film on that. And so Barbara called me up and she said, well, do you want to come in and have a meeting? She goes, are you ready to paint by numbers? As if this was a bad thing. I was like, no, I'm glad. I mean, because like I was sick of like trying to come up with all this shit to please you that I knew that didn't make any sense to me. I'm glad to do it kind of the traditional way, like more the traditional way. So I went in and I did that. We went through so many drafts. And then at a certain point, after they had hired the very untalented John Carl Buechler, very untalented person, very uninteresting person, very literal-minded person, they had hired him, and I did a draft for him with these really stupid notes in it. I mean, there were some of I think even the receptionist gave me better notes than John Carl Buechler. So they were like, okay, well, we're all happy now. Well, I mean, this is right at the end of the year, by the way. I mean, they shot this thing like in December, like right around Christmas. I mean, it was frigid. You could even see. They shot in Alabama. I think the lake was like this big. You know, I mean, they didn't like a really good crystal lake there, but because I remember that John went off, maybe Barbara went with them, but they visited like various places, potential locations. And I remember looking at the video footage of it. They decided in this place in Alabama. So I thought everything was cool. I went off to New York, and my agent called them and said, okay, so my guy, and I'd written like 13, 14 drafts or, you know, something. My agent or more. And my agent, Matt Keener, called them up and he said, okay, so, you know, my guy, you know, wrote, you know, he's, he did everything you asked him to do. And so I want you to, in addition to the back end, I want you to pay him more because he did all these extra drafts for you. It's not fair. He was contracted for more drafts. So Frank, again, hit the roof and was like, you know, because he didn't know anything about all these drafts. And so Barbara said, oh, it was because Daryl's a terrible writer or, you know, whatever it was. We had to get all these extra drafts from him.
Oh, God.
And so they hired some hack. I dive embarrassment at a lot of the dialogue in this thing. Because, I mean, I wouldn't write this kind of shit about penis enlargers and all the, you know, all these weird, you know, sex things. And, you know, of course there's sex inherently in these, you know, it's just part of the whole thing, but it's, oh my God. I watching it the other day, I was like, you know, for this interview, I mean, I was like, oh my God, you know, like I can't believe this. But he, so he came in and he rewrote it, and they gave him the $10,000. And it's not even his real name. He didn't even use his real name. So they gave him Manuel Fidello is.
So that's who this is.
Yeah, that's who that is. As I said, it's not a real person. It was just some guy who came in, you know, did a polish, which meant basically putting in all these awful lines about penis enlargers or whatever. And I think all the kills were more or less. As I had let them, the overall structure was more or less as I had it. I think that I don't think I had used the term, whatever is psychotelekinetic or whatever it is that they say in the movie. I mean, I just said telekinetic. I think he may have put other things in there, you know, having to do with motives or something. You know, why are they running around in the woods, you know, or whatever. So I guess he had put things, having people like turn to each other and say, we're running in the woods because we have to find my mother or whatever it is. But to clarify stuff. So he got the 10 grand, you know, and I remember that. And then Matt Keener, my agent at APA, they fired him, not for anything having to do with, me. I mean, I guess they just didn't like him over there or something like that. So they fired Matt Keener. And I remember calling that other guy, that Brett, that whatever his last name, John Brown or whatever his last name was. And I was like, hi, I can't find that. He goes, we fired him. And this is what's going on with the Friday 13th, the 13th thing. And you're screwed. He didn't care.
Wow.
He didn't give one shit.
You're screwed. Thanks, buddy.
But that's the longest monologue I've ever done on one of your shows, Robert. I'm sorry.
Well, so wait.
No, that's okay.
I love that. You were not on set for this?
No.
Okay.
Thank God. I heard stories. I heard stories, about stuff that went on. No, I wasn't on set. I was there I remember when they hired John. I mean, I was around for a lot of the pre-production stuff,
right?
Because we were like doing pre-production out of the office at Hotel Films over at Paramount. And as I say, they brought in Kane Hodder one day, and I was told that he was going to play Jason,
Yep.
But I can't remember what his face looked like. I just remember this big guy kind of walking past me, and he seemed really jovial. It was just the idea of him playing Jason was just kind of funny to me, because he was like, la la la,
Yeah. And I think maybe I'm incorrect. I don't think so. But this one, and whether I think you would have written this. This is, I think, the first, maybe only, but the first time Jason kills with a motorized weapon. He kills with like a weed whacker, right?
Yeah.
And he had never, right until now, it's machete.
It just kind of appears out of nowhere, though.
Oh yeah, it just came out of nowhere from his tool shed, his bat utility belt. We haven't used the fucking weed whacker yet, and it's the only time right? Because like the sleeping bag, like brute force. That's Jason.
Yeah.
But then he pulls out the weed whacker, and I remember just watching it again because you hear the engine, and I'm like, oh, I don't remember that. I don't kind of equate that sort of sound with Jason. That's a Leatherface sound, and so I think that is something you put in, or
I think I did. I think I don't
weed
think
whacker it is.
Yeah, I think I did. I think because the thing is, the film was cut so much by the censors because John
right. I knew that. Yeah,
I read that this morning.
FX guy, and so and I think, frankly, I just think a really bad director. But just in terms of, he's wasn't an artist. I'll just put it that way. The compositions are mediocre. He doesn't really think cinematically. He was sort of like this. Right. I think he was kind of a Gore nerd and kind of a monster nerd and all that stuff. And so I think that, for him, the thing that I think that most interested him was how to pull off the SFX and
yes.
And how to, really get the maximum gore out of the deaths and all that stuff. And so, it probably put a lot of planning into it. And then this bag will open up and intestines will spew forth and, and that kind of thing. And so, so I think that probably the deaths were really pretty gory, as he filmed them. I'm just guessing because I know that they really took, because it was, I think it got like an X-ray, I didn't know that NC-17 existed then.
Right. No. Yeah. And you're right. Because come to think of it, like when I'm rewatching them, like part one's got gore and like Kevin Bacon getting the spear through his throat and part three, like they all do. This one's not gory, and you can tell they cut it because there's just something like, because like, well, why would they have gone to the trouble of putting all the stuff in the thing, and it's just weird cuts. And it's violent, but it's definitely one of the less gory Friday. I think 6 is too. Those are pretty. Like 4 was brutal, like machete through the head, and fingers cut off, and all that. But this one doesn't have all that stuff, which I'm fine. I'm not a gore guy, so I'm fine with that. But yeah, I like Robert was saying. I too read that they trimmed that down pretty substantially.
They really did. Like with the the sleeping bag kill. I mean, I think Jason banged the bag against the tree 10 times or whatever it was. So you can look. I mean, it just cuts really fast.
Yeah.
I mean, and I put a lot. I mean, I myself, because I just saw this as such an important feature of these films. I mean, I put a lot of thought into the kill sequences.
Sure.
What weapons to use. I was really trying to come up with stuff that had never been used before.
Yeah. You did.
And so the reason the tool shed was conveniently there was so that we could I could have stuff in it. I mean,
yep.
When I think it's the character's name, called Maddie. For me, that's the only death in it aside from the sleeping bag death, which is kind of fun. I mean, I don't really like the death. I mean, I don't really like the film up until Jason finally meets Tina.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of becomes interesting for me.
Oh, it's what a showdown! It's awesome, and it goes on longer than I would have thought. Like, I wish
the whole movie was just that. I mean, it's just sort of not very credible. I mean, there are a lot of things about, of course, I mean, credibility in the context even of this world. I mean, when you really stop to think about it, I mean, with an entity as strong as Jason Voorhees, I mean, would like a lamp on the wall, coming down that where he crashes the lamp into his head. I mean, why would that knock him down through the? I mean, it just wasn't done in a way that was convincing. I mean, it could have been done convincing, or like when the nails, fly into his head.
But that looks cool. Oh my God, yeah, that looked cool.
But it doesn't really feel like because they really should, because when I wrote it, I was kind of thinking there'd be really big nails and I'm just thinking they would have the impact of bullets, Yeah.
That would totally make sense.
They look like little tacks and they kind of go in and then he's like this and you kind of think, well, really? I mean, would that really kind of stagger him?
Yeah. I mean, you're a man who's back from the dead. Would that bother you?
Exactly. But I mean, I mean, I don't know. It seemed good on paper. And there's something about the whole showdown between them that, is kind of interesting to me because I think that the audience does feel a little something for her.
Sure.
Somehow.
Well, like I said, I think it's that you gave her a backstory that we're privy to. So you can't help but be invested in her character. And again,
it's more psychological than
it is. And even for this,
which I appreciated as well.
Right? Yeah. Like there's like a character that we're following. We're in her shoes. And then she's the outsider at the party and she's not cool and all these things.
Just like Carrie.
And it really struck me that we haven't seen that not only in a Friday film, but in any of them. Like, yes, of course, we don't enter these films through the killer. Maybe Freddy eventually, it's sort of his story because he's funny. But you follow a group of kids and blah, 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 blah. But here we're following one and we got a backstory. We have the flashback and it's her as a kid with the thing, and you are emotionally invested. Yeah. And you really are. And then Jason sort of shows up in her story. She doesn't show up in his story. And I think that's the first time. Yeah. That happened, really, and that was really cool. And like me, I forget how old I was, but like really young when I saw this, maybe 11 or something. I didn't think any of that consciously, but for sure, that is something that spoke to me. And I was like a weird ass kid. I didn't have telekinesis, but I was a weirdo and an outsider, and I really liked the Tina character. And we didn't have that. Like we kind of had maybe part 4, like the Tommy Jarvis guy, because we see him again. But we don't. He shows up later. Again, we meet Tina right away, and I think that's just a really, really unique thing. And then we didn't see it again either. I don't think any franchise. Maybe a bit at Halloween 1, like you're following Laurie Strode a little, but again, she's just the final girl, so we're setting up her introduction in a big way, so we get used to her. But again, this one really was, like I said, Jason's entering Tina's world.
Yeah,
I quite liked her as well. Lar Park Lincoln.
Yeah,
it's a shame she didn't have a bigger. It's a shame she didn't have a bigger career because I thought she was quite good. She reminded me a lot of, I forget the actor. She was in The Walking Dead in the first. She played Andrea, the blonde.
Oh,
I forget what the,
I don't know the
looks a
actor's
lot
name.
like
I know who
her.
you're talking about, though. Yeah.
I was like,
We're,
like spitting image.
We're just watching Walking Dead now. We're on like season 5, so I know who you're talking about.
Yeah,
I don't know, but I think that they found
very
Laura
similar.
Lincoln. I mean, I remember hearing about her. I think I could be wrong, but I thought that somehow they found her in Dallas of all places. I don't even know that she was an LA actress, or maybe she was.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
Maybe
so
I guess I'm wrong about this.
I mean, you were there for pre-production. Did you like, how was the casting call? Was it obviously then it wasn't just like LA. It would be a wide search.
No, I mean, I don't know why in the world I had that idea, but I just remember being something about Dallas coming up with relationship to her, and somebody saying, "Oh, she's very good." But what they did was because they wanted to go around the unions, I guess it was that they figured if agents saw that it was a Friday the 13th movie, that they would want to get more money for their clients, like that had happened with me, right? So they changed the name of the movie to like Happy Birthday or some shit, because there's like a surprise birthday party, which is
right.
Yeah, because one girl gets killed with a party favor through the eye too.
Yeah. I was like thinking, well, I love that. Like one of those party horns,
right in the eye.
If it went into the eye, but.
If it was hard enough.
but yeah, they changed the name to Birthday Bash or some shit. And I guess they changed the name of Jason Voorhees, and they sent the script out. So people didn't even know it was a Friday the 13th movie until they'd been hired and they were on vacation.
Right.
And so that none of them could ask for a lot of money. And that's practically all I know about the casting.
What a clever producerial move. And then I feel like I read, because of that, people who had been in prior Fridays auditioned or wanted to, and they're like, "Oh fuck, I can't do this." Like, that's
so strange. I was the lead in part 6. Like, how would no one know this? That's so strange.
That's wild.
I want to tell you that I was interviewed years ago by this guy named, I think his name was Peter Brock. And I would refuse to talk about this movie for a long time, and people would get really mad at me. I mean, I don't Google myself anymore, but probably if you go online, you'll run into somebody somewhere saying what a horrible person I am or something, because of remark. I mean, like when my remarks in the Peter Brock's book, which was called Crystal Lake Memories, came out, I mean, I got established in these horror forums. I mean, these people are nerds. Their whole life is like, remember when Freddy killed such and such with a light switch?
Right.
And so that's like their whole existence. And so they were really mad at me, or they were like all denouncing me or something. Because when I did that interview with Peter Brock, I was like, I'm just going to just talk really, I'm going to talk shit. I mean, I'm just going to talk really frankly. Say Barbara Sachs was, you're
going to name names and everything.
John Buechler was an idiot. And,
Wait, what is this book? Sorry. Which book is this?
It's called Crystal Lake Memories. It's probably out of print now, and probably.
Oh wow! So it's about the whole series. I take
the franchise.
it.
The reason I bring this up is because.
Well, they mention you in the documentary movie under the same name too. There's a movie.
Oh.
Well, and I don't. Am I in it? I don't think I'm in it. Right?
I can't remember. I said a long time.
No,
I know you come up for sure.
I can't remember. I'm pretty sure I'm not in that unless they cut something in or something.
Right.
That I didn't do expressly for it, but I don't think so. Somebody else told me about that. I don't even know. Maybe these people couldn't find me, or maybe they weren't interested in talking to me. I really have no idea. But I would be surprised to learn I'm in that thing. But this guy somehow found me, and he wrote to me, and I was like, okay, well, I'll talk to him. about this, and I'll really let for it. But here's the thing: I mean, he really tried to track down everybody, who had written, directed, or acted in one of these movies, or produced it, or been an assistant producer, or whatever. I mean, he really was really very, very thorough, and I was curious about the other people associated with the franchise, and he told me that in terms of the performers, the two most common stories, what happened, whatever happened to blah 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 stories that he heard were these actors either ending up in porn or becoming religious, becoming like born again Christians. And it's so funny because those things often go together, Often porn stars are like, "Hallelujah, I found Jesus."
Yeah. One extreme to the other. There's no middle road there, man.
I've sinned. Forgive me, God, for fucking in camera like 5,000 times. But yeah. So I just wanted to work that in, which it somehow just made complete sense to me,
Well, I read Kane Hodder has a book too, I believe, about his experience.
I have a signed copy that my brother, he has a book, cool. At least one. It's like his autobiography. And when my brother met him at that festival in Atlanta, I mean, I have it here somewhere. I don't know. He got Kane Hodder to like sign a picture from Friday the 13th. It's one of Kane Hodder, with the axe, where he smashes Melissa in the face. Melissa, by the name, was the name of my ex-girlfriend, so I had her like get in the face with a hatchet.
Jesus!
She was my favorite.
And so he had Kane Hodder, say, "Hello, Daryl," like with the really nice blue pen. I mean, blue, I don't know, like, I don't know how to describe it. I wish I could show it to you, see what I mean. And then he got a copy of this book. I have it here somewhere, and that's signed, so I got those two things from, I never even, the only time I met, Kane Hodder was for like 5 seconds in a hallway, but I got these things from him. So, yeah.
I got to ask about the end, because
oh God! Oh God!
I hope I'm not being offensive, but it is.
No.
I watched it. It was funny watching it with a 12-year-old, and and literally my son burst out laughing.
I don't blame him. I don't blame him.
I mean, it was like, but I'm sort of like, I thought, well, maybe if they made him also look sort of like a monster, but he comes out, he's fairly like, he looks like he just went for a dip.
Yeah, he's untouched.
It's absurd. I can only think that, because I mean, it's really shocking that, even the stuff like the bits where, Tina has these. I mean, I'm sure I took that from Eyes of Laura Mars, which is funny.
I love that one.
Oh yeah,
which is funny because the genesis of these movies was really the Giallo films. I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it's, again, Eyes of Laura Mars has been called an American Giallo.
Giallo, that's right. Yeah.
So it's funny because I saw that movie as a kid, and I didn't really even think that much of it at the time. But I mean, I think it really kind of stayed lodged itself in my memory somehow. Because of course she has all these flashes where she suddenly sees, she's seeing through the eyes of the kid.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. Right.
Oh, like the premonitions that Tina has.
So I think I lifted that. From Eyes of Laura Mars.
Oh, that's cool. All right.
So we had it, but they're done so badly. I mean, in my opinion, there should have been some kind of.
Well, had you had Fellini directing it, I mean.
Well, there you go.
That would have been a different fucking.
I would have loved to have seen that.
I would too. So
I take it you envisioned that in a different way, like with the font. Like, what were you thinking on paper?
I don't know. I mean, I was certainly thinking that somehow these visions would be differentiated, because it's confusing. You'll just cut to a shot of her doing what she does.
I know what you mean.
Suddenly you'll just see this thing, and you're like, what the fuck? And then she's like, I saw someone murdered.
Right.
I guess I just thought they would.
Because then she has to explain it, right? Because we were not sure. But you're right. Like, stylistically, if you shot it like whatever, like a fucking hazy filter over it or Vaseline on the lens, whatever.
something
that would've been
to
cool.
differentiate.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Oh,
so
yeah,
you
it's
don't need to
true.
explain it. Like
But-
we just
Right.
intrinsically get it.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
But they just
Yeah.
got it. It's just done in the way of the, like everything else.
Right.
So I will say about the ending, I mean, at one point in some of these early drafts, I had one of the endings that, I mean, I would just go, I mean, I just had to kind of like make shit up on the fly. I mean, again, I mean, I'm not kidding. I write an entire draft in one fucking night.
Damn.
Yeah.
And one of those trailers over there. And I would just have to like, I was read these notes, there were like pages and pages of like take this all in and like try to figure out like, okay, what can I do here? And I would just toss out anything that, that I could do, anything that would, hopefully something would stick at the wall. So one point I had an idea. I'd never seen anybody do this, and I mean, it didn't really make a lot of sense. But again, I'm throwing everything at the wall. I thought, what if Tina can have all these victims that had been killed, if she could somehow reanimate the victims and have the victims converge on Jason. I mean, that was kind of the final thing, right? It was all these like victims, getting up.
Yeah.
So that stuck to more than one draft. They liked that. I remember that there was this thing where she was almost dead or something. Jason was closing in on her, and then her line was like "rise," and of course, the eye went on for like a whole line, "rise."
Yeah.
And all caps with an exclamation point, and then you would see like these. He was cut to these shots of here's the victim here and here's the victim there, and they would sort of get up, and so I think that this ending with the father kind of came out of that.
Right.
There's a sort of whole Oedipal thing going on in the film, or Electra thing, because the female equivalent, of course, I think Freud had, women have or girls have the Electra complex, which is the equivalent of the Oedipal complex in boys. I think that's correct. But there's this whole thing going on there. It's really weird because you hear the dad go, the beginning of the film going, bitch, come here, slap. She's like, you're drinking. Yeah. And then you hear the girl like go, Daddy, stop. And she runs out. But then she kills him. She's like, Daddy, no.
Yeah.
She's like, I miss him, Mom, and all this. You're like, look, he was like a fucking drunk wife. You missed that dude.
You did the right thing, kid. Fuck, let him wrestle Jason down there.
So I mean, I'm really surprised that John Buechler did not really get into like this whole thing of like the rotting dad and all that, because I mean that was his shtick, that's why Jason had the ribs stuff, but I guess it was just done fast or what. But here's the thing. This is why I brought up the whole thing about the Eyes of Laura Mars things. So like, let's say that, I mean, it's really dumb. I mean, it's completely ridiculous, the whole thing. But let's say that you had him pop up out of the water, and he looked like this, like a zombie out of one of the Fulci movies or whatever.
Yep.
And then it for just a moment there's a sort of a mystery, and then you cut to Tina, and she's having one of those like Eyes of Laura Mars, like we see through her eyes, and this is her father.
That's cool.
Like, and then we see his fucking face.
That would have been cool.
You see,
honestly, seriously,
that would have maybe cleaned it up a little bit.
That would have made it a surprise and kind of like what's the word? I don't know. Just cool. It just would have been cool. It would have made sense. And yeah, you're right. Like visually, and that's the thing, right? Like, I think people forget. And my experience is very limited, and this is a good segue for me. Bear with me. But I think, people think everyone is an auteur, that they're directing what they write, or whatever they write is the director is going, yes, sir, it's going to look exactly, and it isn't. You're handing that over to someone, and God willing, there's some, maybe that you're going to get what I'm saying, and then maybe they don't. You see like the ending of Friday 7, you're like, oh, fuck, dude. But I'm just going to segue because I do have to go. I want to just say, though, see if I can tie this all up. One, And I wrote this to Duke yesterday or something. I am like kind of retroactively starstruck with Duke today, knowing full well when we met him that he had already written Friday. But like I don't know, rewatching it not long ago really was this visceral experience, and it brought me back to childhood. And it was, and I'm not just saying that because you're here. That was my favorite Friday, still is. And Six, I like Six a lot. And so like, holy shit. And then now we're gonna fucking talk about it with the guy who wrote it. Like, I'm like, oh god damn it. And so this is very thrilling for me. And I was talking to Jess, my wife, about it, and I was like, oh my god. She's like, you've already met him and you guys chat. I'm like, yeah, but fucking it's gonna be about the thing, man. This is like a big deal to me. Anyway, so this is really
I'm really
cool.
flattered.
It's very, very cool. And so, yeah, some shameless self-promotion. So I did, and I won't go into the whole story why, but yeah, I stopped acting, not like I fucking Mickey Rourke went into boxing from this illustrious career. I'm a nobody, but just, yeah, I'm good. That's over. I just love writing, and that's another story. And Duke, I think I told you this, that I kind of accidentally, the opposite experience of you, and not at that level, but I am the horror guy. Like you weren't, and then you got like the biggest franchise there was. I am a horror fanatic, and I've started getting some good news in that world. And one thing we're doing that I do want to promote with Robert's permission is Jess has become an actor, but a real good producer, and I mean real good. And we've done 2 out of 3 short films that we've shot so far, and there's a plan to this. And I can say she's a good producer because I've been on real sets as an actor, and I've seen them run, and she's figured it out. And I know they're only short films, but it's pretty good. And so we're gearing up for our last. And the first one, I wrote all of them, co-wrote the last one with Jess, but the first one's horror, of course. Second one, a little drama, a little horror. Third one, comedy. And that's where Jess came in. She wanted me to write a comedy and leave it to me. She read it, went, it's fucking dire. Like there's death and murder. Can I punch it up and make? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's okay. I thought it was funny. She's like, yeah, but you've got murder in it. And well,
it's a dark comedy.
Yeah, and I'm like, I can't help it. I'm trying to write something like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and it's a Friday the 13th movie. Anyway, so Robert, with your permission,
yeah, go ahead.
If we could attach we've got an Indiegogo campaign going now to raise some funds just for post-production for the 2 we already shot, and each one's looking better, and the third one to well, same thing, post-production, hopefully to pay some of these people at some point too, because we've assembled an amazing crew and they work really hard. And to kind of like what Duke was saying about the end of Friday Part 7 is the first of these shorts I directed, and that's not really my thing. The second I co-directed, but really me and the DP, he directed it. I kind of dealt with performance, but he saw it. And when we were talking beforehand, and I know on a bigger like scale thing like Friday the 13th, you were not communicating with the director. It's hand us the draft we want, notes, give us the draft, and then it's Buechler. And on a little short film, my experience thus far is lucky because this guy and I talk, and he clearly sees what I'm seeing. So when we're shooting it, and I'm looking at the monitor, I'm like, fuck yeah. Like that's the weird effect I want. Like you get it. So I can only imagine what a downer it is. Again, on a global scale with Friday the 13th, to have like a cool ending in mind, and then you watch it and you're like, oh, fuck off. That's not it.
I had mentioned that. Well, I mentioned that, for years I didn't see the whole thing. I mean, I only went back to watch the film. I mean, I watched it on, I guess DVD or something. After that communication with my friends, and you will know us by the Trail of Dead, I was like, I should really sort of watch the whole film. But what had happened was I'd gone off after I wrote the script. I mean, a few months later, I went off to Europe to make this film. I had a nervous breakdown while making this film. I mean, I was off, I was an actor. It was a horrible experience. And by nervous breakdown, I mean, I started to have really bad panic attacks, which I didn't even know what that was then. I mean, I found out after I got home. But I was really weirded out, and I came back. I was staying in New York. I didn't want to go back to LA. I was staying with these friends of mine in New York. And one day I was, I guess in the Times Square area, maybe even because there were a lot of auditions in that area because, it's Broadway and all that. And there were just a lot of show business type people in that area. So a lot of my auditions were, in that area. So I was there and I was walking down the street and like Friday had come out like, months earlier. I mean, I was off making that film in Europe. And in fact, I got like newspaper clippings that were sent to me, in the mail. It was, like letters and stuff. I mean, people were writing to me like, oh, I went to go see Friday, and here's a newspaper clipping about it and all that. And it was really exciting, so so this was months later and I saw that it was playing on one of those, movie houses
in Times Square.
Yeah. And so I went in, I ducked into it. I mean, I didn't even know, I think at the time, if I was, if I went in, I think I just kind of rolled the dice. I was thinking, well, maybe they'll be showing because it was playing with like, it was like a triple feature or something, playing. And I walked in right before, I think that the showdown between Jason and Tina, because I remember being there when the personal penis line came up, and I knew nothing, and I remember just like being, oh God, I think I wrote that. But it was kind of, in a way, I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better way to see what I did of it at that time because it was like this, like this audience filled with, probably homeless people, winos or whatever. And they were like yelling at the screen, let it go, right on, that kind of shit,
Yeah.
It was kind of cool.
Right. Yeah.
They have like Jason like attack somebody. Whoa!
Yeah.
So, I watched at the beginning of the film, and I guess, to my way of thinking at the time, I mean, because I must have seen the ending, with the dopey shit with the father popping out, ears like flying around, like this kind of like John Mellencamp, pork chop flying up, like, here I am, Tina.
Yeah.
I'm gonna save you. It's like, yeah.
God.
You are gonna you're going to overpower Jason fucking Vorhees. Yeah, dude, I totally buy it.
Yeah.
But I guess in the context of everything else, I mean, it didn't seem any more ridiculous than anything else to me.
No, man, it isn't. I mean, these things got outlandish. I don't know if you saw Jason Takes Manhattan.
Oh, but, I didn't know.
Do yourself a favor. Did you?
I've seen, like I said, my son is like a horror buff. So I've seen, I don't know how many in the last year or so. And we've seen the whole series of this.
Oh, fuck, good for you. All right. Yeah, same here. I didn't see Jason Goes to Space.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet.
Oh, I haven't seen that one. I did see one of them. I think I did maybe watch Jason Goes to Manhattan. I mean, isn't it the one where they're like on a ferry?
Yes, they're on a boat for 80% of the movie. And then Vancouver doubles for Manhattan. Of course. Except for like one Times Square shot. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They're so cheap. They wouldn't even my God. They were like super cheap, those people.
Oh, I'm sure, man. They got to keep that machine moving, keep the expenses down. But, yeah,
I know you got to jump off.
Always mad at me because Matt Keener got me $30,000, which they didn't want to pay. I don't know why they agreed to it. I think
$30,000 today.
How's the residuals now, Duke?
I don't know. I get stuff. I used to get stuff from the WGA. It was really weird. They're called foreign levies, but I mean, it wasn't a WGA project.
Right.
maybe there was stuff, I don't know, I don't even know how this all works, but sometimes I would get these really nice checks, and it would have like a list of all the films. They're from the WGA, these foreign levies, and they have all these films on it. They were not WGA movies, so I don't know, somehow these levies, I don't even know what that means, were collected by WGA, and somehow they found, they found me, and they would just send me these. I would just go to my mailbox and be like, oh my God, there's a check for like, $2,000 on WGA, and it would list all these films on it that weren't even WGA productions. So I don't remember if I was, looking for like, Friday the 13th, listed among the films, but
right.
No, I signed away. I mean, that's the thing. When you're doing exploitation, typically, I mean, you sign everything away for life without hope of any residuals.
Yeah. Someone else is collecting
take my
all
image,
that.
take my words, take my
it's gone. It's gone.
It's yours.
Yeah. No, but really, this was so cool.
Yeah, this was fun.
It was a great idea, guys. It's really cool.
I knew it would be an entertaining story, and it sure was.
It's so cool
and amusing.
I am such a Friday, and of this film in particular, fan, and horror. I love horror, and I'm embracing that as my genre as a fledgling writer, and so I'm in good company with Duke. It's really cool, man. And I think you and I should get together and write Jason Meets like a Werewolf.
I'll leave the link in the description box for your
Thank you so much.
Indiegogo. And of course, Duke, I'll put your social media handles, even though I know you hate all that. I won't ask you about the handles.
Oh yeah, no, don't bother. I'm just going to do this for
do that.
There you go.
And I just want to say this was such a great reunion. I mean, we should all get together.
I would love to do this again. Yeah.
Thank you both for coming back.
I loved it. 3 fucking years, dude. I mean, we said at the end of the first video, it was like, let's do this again. And like, here it is, like over 3 years.
3.5 years. Yeah, 3.5. We'll plan something else.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll plan something else for sure. But
please. Yeah.
But thanks again, both. And
thank you guys.
Let's do it again. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link, patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. Patreon is exclusive content that I create month in and month out. And as a subscriber, you are able to vote on polls and contribute to what I do on Patreon month in and month out. So head over to the link for full details. You can also leave a donation directly to my YouTube channel by pressing the thanks link, which you will find directly below the video frame. Just click on the thanks link and you can leave a donation there if you choose to. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so. By pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo, you will see it floating above my head in the top left corner. To your top left in just a second, just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes. Also click the like button and leave a comment below. Let me know what you think of this episode. Also, you can also share the episode. All of these things are what produce traction to my YouTube channel. So I appreciate you watching and thank you again. And I will see you in the next episode.